Picnic? Oh, no, 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 no. No. You remember what happened last time, don't you?
Please pass the egg salad.
Fraggle, Fraggle!
Ah! Somebody help me!
So, to nobody's surprise, I'm sure we're all at least familiar with the idea that the more well-versed you are in a subject or in a hobby or in a sphere of knowledge, the more likely you are to come across these less well-known parts of the subject. The whole idea of the deeper you go, the further down the rabbit hole, the further down the iceberg. Yeah, so those iceberg charts that you saw making the rounds on the internet a couple of years ago that got really big, well, they're still around, first of all, but they're a really good example of how niche partition of knowledge exists. The top of the iceberg is for those people outside of the knowledge sphere, and the bottom of the iceberg is for those people who go really in depth in terms of the research or in terms of the dedication to the subject at hand. There have been dozens of these over the years, dozens of different subjects, dozens of different topics, and dozens of different YouTube videos covering them. But this one right here is one that's very near and dear to my heart. I am really big in the sphere of cryptozoology. I love cryptids. I grew up watching Lost Tapes and The Secret Saturdays. Yeah, remember that show? This iceberg right here, it is special to me. I've seen a couple of different cryptid icebergs made over the years, but I think this is the one of the best quality. Created by Reddit user Thy Cheshire Cat, this particular cryptid iceberg divides its entries into easy-to-read sections, each of these sections given a very creative description as to how far down the iceberg you've gone. And it also divides its subjects into 3 separate categories, with white text being average cryptids, red text being very obviously fake or internet origin cryptids, and the yellow text being paleontological cryptids. That last one is absolutely fascinating to me, and it crosses over 2 of my biggest childhood adorations in cryptozoology and paleontology. I am going to have so much fun dissecting this entire thing. Really quick shout out to Thy Cheshire Cat. You knocked it out of the park with this one. I wish you could have included the Giant of Kandahar on it, but I guess we can't all win. What you have here, though, is a special one. And there is one last thing that I want to get into really quick before I start breaking down this iceberg, and that is the fact that this video will be biased. Every single documentary that you have ever seen in your life has been made with a bias. Now, I know a lot of people think documentaries are pieces of unbiased nonfiction, but that isn't the case. Ideally, they should be. But every single documentary you've ever seen is trying to put out some form of a biased message, whether that be a very subtle and positive one, or a very heavy-handed and negative one. Take a look at Walking with Dinosaurs. It was the first documentary of its kind, both in terms of the groundbreaking technology and how it was narratively designed. It was the first dinosaur documentary that didn't look at them as being mysterious or monstrous. It was the first documentary of its kind to look and feel like an average nature documentary. It looks much more like something akin to Planet Earth than it does to something akin to Monsters Resurrected. Side note, Monsters Resurrected is garbage. Do not watch it. But anyways, back to my point at hand. This video will be biased. Think of it as a pseudo-documentary. I am taking you through a knowledge sphere. I am explaining things to you, possibly teaching you things you might not have known. And in this, I have to warn you that I am personally biased, as I think some of these cryptids have a lot of legitimacy to them. I personally believe in a couple of cryptids. I think that some of the entries on this iceberg are absolutely real, or at the very least worth a second look. A lot of these deserve a lot of scrutiny. A lot of these, though, I think are valuable pieces of speculation. Now, finally, without further ado, without any more preamble, let's finally dig into Tier 1 of the Cryptid Iceberg, starting with the biggin.
What happened in here? Did the refrigerator throw up?
Billy wants us to go on a picnic.
No way, Jose. You remember what happened last time. Please pass the egg salad.
Fraggle, Fraggle!
Ah! Somebody help me!
Oh, Oh my goodness! Look at this. It's the book by Jeff Meldrum. About the Bigfoot, about Sasquatch, about the Saskmo. So yeah, unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple thousand years, you're probably aware of the most infamous and popular cryptid of all time, and probably one of the most viable. But that whole subject in itself is another topic for another day and another video. I don't really think I need to explain what it is, but for the uninitiated, Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, is a large, hairy ape-man monster that lives in the woods and has been recorded in oral tradition for close to 5,000 years near globally. Yes, I said globally. For every culture around the world that has legends of giants, they have some form of the Bigfoot monster. They take many different names, have many different forms. The most infamous and scrutinized is the one from the Pacific Northwest in North America. Sighted from Alaska all the way down through to California, all along the western coast on the Pacific Ocean. Descriptions of this cryptid vary in terms of the fur coloration, the height, the weight. I've heard as big as 12 feet tall and close to 1,200 pounds, which is ridiculous and frankly terrifying. I've also heard more conservative, between 6 to 8 feet tall, and they run the full gambit of the color spectrum. There's red hair, brown hair, white hair, gray hair, black hair, any kind of hair you can imagine in a natural animal, Bigfoot probably has. Now, of course, being the most well-known cryptid, this is also the most heavily scrutinized and debated. I've heard a lot of good arguments on both sides of the issue debating whether or not it is a legitimate creature. As for myself, I do happen to believe in it. It's my personal favorite cryptid. There are also innumerable fascinating accounts and sightings. You have the Patterson-Gimlin film, as aforementioned and seen in this photo here. You have the story of Albert Ostman, which, whether you believe it or not, is still a fascinating tale. You have the recorded Bigfoot attack from the Wilderness Explorer, as recorded by Theodore Roosevelt, which, fun fact, there's a debate about whether or not Roosevelt is writing this about a personal encounter, but he's just changing the identity in order to avoid scrutiny on his character and legitimacy, which, yeah, no, I understand that. No one wants to be known as the guy who believes in Bigfoot, right? Except for me. I'll be that guy. This whole topic really deserves its own dedicated video at some point, but for now, that is Bigfoot. One of the biggest pop culture darlings for monsters popping up all over science fiction are the Greys. I know some people would debate putting them on a cryptid tier list to begin with, but I feel like aliens and cryptids are in enough of the same wheelhouse that we can talk about them here. The Greys are your prototypical alien design. The big head, the large bulbous black eyes, the tiny nose, tiny mouth, the lack of ears. They just look like aliens. We see this and we know exactly what it is. This also happens to be what a lot of witnesses have stated aliens look like. Some people who claim to have been abducted by extraterrestrials say that these are the ones who captured them and performed various scientific experiments. Or pseudo-scientific, depending. These are the little buggers flying around in UFOs, making crop circles, mutilating our cattle, and creating conspiracy theories like you've never seen before. There's really not much to talk about with these guys that you don't already know. They're aliens. Moving on. Sorry to break the news to you, kid, but I really don't think that Nessie exists. Isn't that a weird line to draw for this? Nessie, otherwise known as the Loch Ness Monster, is an infamous lake monster living where else but Loch Ness in Scotland. Widely believed to be a plesiosaur, or at least a plesiosaur-type creature, and often regarded as the second most infamous cryptid just behind Sasquatch. Nessie really is a hallmark of Scottish legend and folklore at this point. Now, if the folklore of this creature is to be believed, the first sightings of it are from the 6th century in the writings of Saint Columba. However, we didn't really have a consistent description of what this monster looked like until the 1930s. Now, into the 1930s, there were several sightings back to back that really helped to define and describe what it is that Nessie looks like, that plesiosaurid depiction. However, they did not start that way. Some just described amorphous black shapes, one described it as an entirely terrestrial camel, one just said it was a giant otter. You win some, you lose some. But the most popular image of Nessie is this, the surgeon's photo, taken by a gynecologist. What's even funnier is that this photo was confirmed and proven to be a hoax. It was a cardboard cutout attached to a toy submarine. But that still doesn't stop people from scouring Loch Ness and looking for it. Honestly, commendable. With the amount of scientists and researchers and hunters and nut bars who go into the Pacific Northwest looking for Bigfoot, I think I can commend a couple of people going out on a boat with a sonar system in order to find Nessie. The problem being that the loch really isn't that big, nor is it really that deep. At least, not as deep as you would, need it to be for a creature of this size. Adding to that, I don't know that there is enough food to sustain Nessie, especially not for as long as we've seen it. But hey, you know what? Maybe it's the ghost of a plesiosaur. That would be nutty. And honestly, I think I prefer the idea that Nessie is the ghost of a monster more than a living monster. I think that's much more interesting. You hear that, kid? You're all right. Occasionally known by the stupider moniker of the abominable snowman, the Yeti is the Himalayan cousin of Sasquatch. Sighted all throughout the Himalayan mountains in India, China, Bhutan, Nepal, and Pakistan, and sometimes even as far north as Russia. The Yeti is one of the cryptids that I think has the most misinterpretation to it. Most sightings of the Yeti occur on the mountains not because they live there, but because it's easier to see them there. According to the legends of the locals, the creature known as the Yeti, or the Yedid, as they pronounce it, is a creature of the forest that only traverses over the mountains to get to the valleys that lay between them. Which, of course, makes a lot more sense from a biological standpoint. You can't support an 8-foot tall ape in the ice and the snow. Snow leopards, sure, they can live in the mountains, but that's an entirely different ecological niche, and I don't want to go into a rant discussing this. Suffice it to say, the Yeti lives in the jungles between the mountains and just traverses over the mountains, and that is why we see it when we do. It also has one of the funniest cases of a mistranslated name ever. Bob Gimlin does a fantastic breakdown of this mistranslation in his Yeti video, and I highly recommend you check it out. I will link it in the description below. The Yeti is also one of the few cryptids where supposedly we have a physical piece of evidence of this creature in the Yeti scalp that's kept at the Kwajing Monastery. I hope I pronounced that okay. What a lot of people will point out is that the scalp they have is fake, which, of course it is. It's the one that's on public display. I think that if they had the actual scalp, they wouldn't leave it out in the open. And so what you're seeing, of course, is a fake replica. Again, this is a coin toss debate as to whether or not they even had one to begin with. Of course, me being me, I'm going to veer on the side of course, it's real. So yeah, the Yeti. Ghosts are the spirits of people or animals that continue on after death. Yet again, this is another very well-known cryptid, something that has been cited all over the world in countless cultures with countless myths and countless legends. It is very ingrained in the human experience to believe in, or at least think about, ghosts. They take a variety of forms, both visible and invisible. You can see a full body apparition. You can see a wispy form. They can come out of the fog, handprints on the glass. There could be floating orbs. And alongside this variety of forms, there are also a variety of potential dispositions that they can have, both aggressive and benign. There's also like a massive variety of different ghost shows out there, so you're really not starving for ghost entertainment. For anybody wondering if Ouija boards and seances are legit, I think they are. At the very least, you probably don't want to be contacting things. And for a really quick clarification here, poltergeists and ghosts are not the same thing. A poltergeist is a manifestation of negative energy that can interact with the physical world. A ghost is something that used to be living at one point. So a poltergeist never actually lived. And now you know. I'll be honest, I don't understand why this one's so popular. Living megalodon refers to the idea that there are living or extant members of the species of extinct giant shark known as Carcharocles megalodon, which I would like to point out went extinct over 2 million years ago in the Miocene epoch. Now, these were massive sharks. They preyed on whales and were in turn preyed upon by the massive whale Leviathan, and they are largely regarded as being, extinct. So any and all sightings that you see of them are most likely hoaxes, or, people lying, or misidentifications. People like to say that these 10,000-year-old teeth that are washed up on the beaches are, genuine articles of evidence of these creatures, but they're also found to largely just be falsified. And insofar as the mistaken identity goes, I can't tell you how annoyed it makes me whenever I see a video of a basking shark and people just shout about how it's a megalodon. Like, no, Megalodon doesn't live. It is not at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. Jason Statham is lying to you. It also got really big around the time of the Discovery Channel mockumentary about the Megalodon shark. I'm sure a lot of people are at least passingly familiar with this particular documentary that premiered during Shark Week in order to boost ratings. It was a massive hit, but it was also a massive hoax. To this point in time, there are 0 reputable, or even notable sightings of a living, extant megalodon shark, I am very sorry to say. The bloop was an ultra-low frequency sound recorded off the coast of Chile by the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration in 1997. And the identity of this sound's creator remains one of the greatest oceanographic mysteries of all time. The original sound can be found in its entirety on YouTube very easily and in very high quality. And to this day, no one is quite 100% sure as to the identity of what it was that created this noise. The most widely held and accepted explanation that I have seen online is that it was either underground or underwater volcanic activity, or else underwater ice scraping along the bottom of the ocean floor. However, there's an equally popular idea is that the bloop is in fact a massive underwater creature. Some have speculated it to be mammalian in origin due to the bloop itself sounding similar to some whale calls. And no, before anybody gets any ideas, the bloop is not a living megalodon. Sharks do not have vocal cords, they do not make noises. To this day, there hasn't been a single explanation of the bloop that's been either disqualified or entirely proven, so the answer's out there somewhere, just waiting to be debunked. Maybe it even looks exactly like Pick related. The Kraken is yet another legendary sea monster, this one coming to us from Scandinavian and Norse mythology. The first ever writing that we have of the Kraken occurs in the 13th century Edda of Orvar Odd's saga. Within this saga, we are introduced to two different sea monsters, Hafgufa, the sea mist, and Lyngbakr, the heatherback. Of these two monsters, Hafgufa is the one that would become the precursor to the Kraken. The Kraken itself is described as a massive squid or octopus monster, legendary in its temperament and its tendency to attack ships. And not just attack ships. If you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, you know that this monster can sink them with minimal effort. In fact, belief in the Kraken was so widespread and accepted that naturalist Carl Linnaeus even described the Kraken in his first volume of Systema Naturae in 1735. And this is like no joke. Carl Linnaeus was a big figure in naturalism and biology. He is one of the forefathers of modern zoology. So for him to record this monster and believe in it so wholeheartedly, that really does say something. Now, I generally do think there is potential for there to be a massive squid out there. The giant squid and then later the discovery of the colossal squid definitely add to this idea. Do I think it could definitely get to the size of the Kraken? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot about cephalopod biology that we don't really know, and the depths of the ocean are very well suited to large squid, unlike large sharks. The Kraken is therefore more likely than the Megalodon. Come at me. The brainchildren of legendary Toronto artist Trevor Henderson, the Henderson monsters are the first catch-all group of cryptids on this iceberg, and they are also the first one to be entirely fictitious. Henderson is an artist and animator infamous for the creation of such internet urban legends as Cartoon Cats, Longhorns, the Bridgeworm, and his most infamous one of all, Siren Head. Absolutely none of these animated monstrosities are legitimate, but the videos themselves garnered a lot of attention when they were first posted to TikTok and Tumblr. As one might expect, they managed to gain a lot of traction among the old creepypasta communities, and in a lot of ways I can see these as being modern creepypasta. So, sorry to say, they're not real, but I admire the devotion that the fanbase has to them. Canid chupacabras are the American-specific variation of the chupacabra urban legend and cryptid. For anyone who's not well versed in cryptids, this might come as a shock, but there are multiple different variants of the chupacabra, or at least multiple different appearances that people say they take. The canid one is a very localized one to the southern United States, most predominantly in Texas. Now, what's especially noteworthy about these cryptids is that they actually do exist. They are just dogs, or foxes, or coyotes, or even sometimes raccoons afflicted with mange. Anytime I see a video or a photo of one of these, I just feel really bad because I know that there is a poor, poor animal afflicted with scabies that is just scared and in pain. If you yourself ever see something like this, please contact animal control and get it the help that it needs. They are most likely terrified. And so I'm sorry to say, but this is not a chupacabra. It's just a dog. Here's another one that I really don't get being lumped in with other cryptids, but zombies. Yeah, zombies, the flesh-eating, undead, walking, shambling corpses. The ones that you might see populating The Walking Dead. Yeah, those sorts of zombies. Or Alternatively, we are talking about specifically voodoo zombies. You know, the ones from Haiti, those sort of things. Yeah, I gotta admit, I don't understand why these ones in particular are on this iceberg. Flesh-eating undead zombies definitely don't exist. Voodoo zombies are a really fascinating subject that I'll want to look into more someday. I think there's definitely more to that than meets the eye, but for now, that's all I have to say on them. Angels and demons are some of the most well-known spiritual entities to ever exist. Most, if not all, major cultures around the world have some form of these two beings, the most popular of which obviously coming from the Judeo-Christian religions. But the common ideas of angels and demons have been adapted and readapted and reinterpreted for centuries. These go back thousands of years, and now they are a cornerstone of pop culture, not just for horror, but for sci-fi and fantasy and all these sorts of different TV shows and books and movies and what have you. Angels are often seen as the ultimate good, demons diametrically opposed as among the ultimate of evils. Each of these two types of entities are divided into multiple different subcategories and subtypes, and there's really way too much for me to get into here. Suffice to say, I will do a fuller breakdown of angels and demons in the future, because there's a lot to get into. And honestly, this is a subject that I find interesting. Like, I haven't even gotten into the Nephilim. There's so much to cover with this, I'll have to come back to it. Bottom line though, angels and demons and Nephilim are very, very real. European panthers refers to the entirely unprecedented and unexpected phenomenon of large black cats being seen all throughout England and the rest of the United Kingdom. These alien black cats, as they are sometimes known, are the most enigmatic cryptid to come out of the United Kingdom in the last 50 years, but they're also one of the most unexpected. I mean, when you think of England, do you really think of Black Panthers being on the loose? What's interesting about these cryptids in particular, though, is that they are one of the few cryptids to have resulted in a physical altercation with a person. In the year 2000, a young boy in Monmouthshire, Wales, was attacked by one of these large cryptids. Not only was he attacked by them, but it left large lacerating claw marks on his face. A zoologist was called in to analyze these marks and to give his own explanation as to what could have attacked the boy. And all he could give to the description of the attack was that the claw marks were near identical to ones he had seen done by leopards in Africa. So already right there we have physical evidence of an altercation that is as of yet unexplained, especially when you consider that a large black cat shouldn't be too hard to find in rural England. This isn't the only incident of a cat attacking a human, though, and this isn't the only sighting of these creatures. We have recorded incidents of them going back into the 1970s and even further beyond that. The most common explanation that we have for these panthers is that they are some rural population of escaped private pets or circus animals, but I really don't think that would explain the strange period of attacks that we've had over the last 60 years or so. Especially when you consider that an escaped population of pets or circus animals does not adequately explain away the fact that we have a population of large black cats in England, supposedly. You would think by now that they would have died off, but no, we keep seeing them. And just as a side note, aren't they just gorgeous? Look at this photo. That's a beautiful animal. Slenderman is one of the most infamous internet urban legends of all time and is probably the most well-known creepypasta character ever devised. Created by Eric Knudsen in 2009 for the Something Awful forum, Slenderman is a tall, lanky, enigmatic, almost eldritch entity wearing a sharp black suit and possessing no face. Despite the fact that the Slenderman is an entirely fictitious entity, it does draw inspiration from a lot of real-life folklore and legend. There is a lot of fae lore in the Slender Man. There's a lot of ideas of shadow people in the Slender Man. It also takes very heavy inspiration from the writing of H.P. Lovecraft, and even takes some hints from the urban legends of the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. Slenderman was further popularized with the creation of the game Slender in 2012, a game that has been well documented and played through on YouTube. Now, in spite of the fact that the Slenderman is a fictitious entity, that did not stop people from building on the lore and creating stories about this character, which ultimately led to one of the most shocking cases of true crime any cryptid has ever inspired, when in 2014, two teenage girls attempted to murder their friend in order to gain favor with the Slenderman. This incident on its own is already shocking, but even more so when you realize that they were most likely goaded and groomed into it by these fictitious stories and these authors that created them. There's a lot to go into with this incident, and I don't have time to get into it. Maybe I will explore it in the future. One last thing about the Slender Man that I find really bizarre is that there are spin-off versions of him, like his cousins or something like that. The Goatman is a half-human, half-goat classification of monster. There have been multiple different Goatman entities, but the most infamous ones are probably the Maryland Goatman and the Pope Lick Monster. Now, the description of these cryptids in terms of their behavior varies from a rather enigmatic entity that hides from humanity to a violent axe-wielding psychopath. And just as varied as the descriptions of their behavior are the descriptions of their origin. Some origins claim that it was a biological experiment gone awry, while others claim it was a farmer who made a deal with a devil. The devil deal origin often lends itself to ideas of magic powers that the Goatman possesses in order to entrance its victims, but most of the time it's just a psychopathic axe wielder. Or just some monster in the woods who happens to not like dogs very much. Also, sometimes it eats people, so, you know. The Mothman has to be one of the most well-known and beloved cryptids of all time. Described as a large, humanoid flying entity with no head, no visible neck, and two large, luminous, glowing red eyes, the Mothman was first sighted in 1966 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The original string of Mothman sightings occurred over a period of 13 months, beginning on the night of November 15th, 1966. During that night, two young couples were driving their car past an area of Point Pleasant known as the TNT area. The TNT area, by the way, was an old munitions depot from back in World War II. In any case, these two couples, while on their drive, saw two large glowing red eyes from out in the darkness and stopped for a moment to investigate. What they at first thought was a large bird turned out to be a large, winged humanoid that started to chase their car. This chase, by the way, went upwards of 100 miles per hour, and the creature was able to keep pace with them. This was just the start of many sightings that would occur over a period of time until December 15th of 1967. It was early this morning that the Silver Bridge collapsed, sending the rush hour traffic into the river and resulting in the unfortunate deaths of 46 people. Not long after this disaster occurred, the original string of Mothman sightings started to peter out. But this wouldn't be the end of the Mothman, as it would be seen off and on sporadically for the next couple of decades up until today, and not just in West Virginia. There are people who claim that Mothman is a harbinger of disaster because some eyewitnesses purport that they have seen the creature in the lead up to infamous disasters. What's interesting about the Mothman is it's one of the few cryptids where we don't have any sort of photographic evidence for it. The only photos we have are either fakes or misidentifications, and to this day, the best evidence we have of it remains eyewitness testimony, particularly those from the original 13 months of the sighting. Mothman is also often associated with other similar cryptids, such as the Blackbird of Chernobyl. And in addition to this, it is often tied into stories of cryptids like Indrid Cold or the Men in Black, who will be discussed further down this iceberg. The explanations for Mothman seem to vary, some people leaning more towards the paranormal, some people leaning more towards the extraterrestrial. But unfortunately, the most common purported explanation is that Mothman just does not exist. It's either a hoax or a misidentified owl. Me, myself, I like to believe in our large insect overlord, and I hope he returns someday soon. I chose this photo because it's one of the most infamous hoaxes of all time. Living mermaids is a very simple one to explain. It's just the idea that mermaids exist. I'm certain everyone's familiar with the concept of the very feminine, half-human, half-fish creatures from myth and legend. What's really interesting about mermaids, though, is the recent revitalization in popularity and interest they've garnered due to two very different factors. The first one, and the one I will give less attention to, is one called cyanomelia, which is an anatomical condition where the legs are fused in utero, resulting in a baby born with what appears to be a mermaid's tail instead of legs. The second one that I find far more interesting is the infamous aquatic ape hypothesis. First put forward in 1942 by Max Westenhofer, the aquatic ape hypothesis is a theory about how mermaids might have evolved alongside modern man via contact with the ocean on the Horn of Africa. No, I am not making this up. Yes, there have been documentaries using this as a basis. Most infamously, Mermaids, The Body Found, which we can put right next to that Megalodon documentary as Discovery Channel schlock that somehow lots of people believed in. In fact, it was even popular enough to garner a sequel. Mermaids, The New Evidence. I think I'd still believe mermaids more than the living Megalodon, though. The Fresno Nightcrawlers are two unidentified and as of yet unexplained entities that were first captured on a security camera in, where else? Fresno, California. And really, this is all we have of them. Similar entities have been described and filmed before, but there is nothing quite exactly like these to have ever been seen since. And this is absolutely fascinating to me because this is all we have. This singular video is all we have of the Fresno Nightcrawlers. Rather infamously, people have attempted to debunk this, but nothing has come quite close to exactly replicating what this video shows us. So for now, these little weirdos, they're just kind of wandering around in the wilds of California. And with that, we have finished tier 1 of the iceberg. On to tier 2. We're gonna start to get freaky with it.
A picnic? Oh, honey, no, no. You remember what happened last time?
Please pass the eggs, darling.
Fraggle, Fraggle!
Ah! Somebody help me!
The lizard chupacabra, also known as the Puerto Rican chupacabra, is another one of the many chupacabra variants and the very start of the legend itself. The original string of sightings of the chupacabra first started in 1995 and continued upwards until 1997. These dates will be very important in just a moment. Originally, the first sightings of the chupacabra were very brief, very fleeting, and oftentimes most people just saw what was left behind in the wake. Which is to say that the chupacabra, Spanish for goat sucker, would leave behind exsanguinated farm animals. Goats, sheep, chickens, roosters, rabbits, and even sometimes cats and dogs were often on the menu of this cryptid. In addition to this, it was said to be able to leap incredible distances, possess large bulbous eyes and spines all down its back, and generally look so far removed from the canid chupacabra we're used to seeing in Texas. Now, the reason I said the dates were important to remember is because a lot of people believe that these were completely regular occurrences, just feral dogs attacking farm animals, but that mass hysteria combined with people having recently seen the film Species, which came out in 1995, caused people to believe it was some sort of an alien monster killing their livestock. Personally, I don't think it was entirely attributed to the movie Species, largely because the alien seen in that movie does not entirely resemble what people were describing. There were some similarities, but I don't think that's entirely it. And in addition to this, you would think that a rural population of farmers would know exactly what it was that was killing their livestock. Especially when you consider that the animals were exsanguinated. There wasn't any sign of a struggle, there wasn't any noise, and their bodies weren't mutilated. And if you know anything about feral dogs, you would know that they tend to mutilate things they attack. Other than a hoax, the most widely regarded explanation for chupacabra is that they are a non-sapient extraterrestrial species, although there are some that claim it to be a government experiment. Either way, I think the original chupacabra is superior to the Texas variants in every way. The Men in Black are not the prototypical cryptid and are in fact more of a response group actively pursuing cryptids. Often present in the witness testimony for UFO or alien or cryptid encounters are the eyewitnesses divulging that they were approached and silenced by entities dressed in crisp black suits. These entities were described as appearing human, but not entirely. Sometimes they didn't even look human at all. They were just completely uncanny, stone-faced, emotionless agents, forcing them into silence after inquiring specific details about their encounters. The Men in Black are an enigma, and continue to persist to this day in the realms of ufology and cryptozoology, with a very infamous and chilling encounter having taken place in Niagara Falls, of all places, as depicted here. The full history of the Men in Black deserves their own video breakdown, and I will have to give them their due someday. Lycanthropes refers to any number of contemporary cryptid sightings attributed to lycanthropy or traditional werewolf legend. One of these particular cryptids is mentioned further down the iceberg, so I'll break that one down more succinctly when I get to it, but for some other examples of lycanthropy in modern cryptozoology, we have the Michigan Dogman, we have the Rougarou from Louisiana, and there are even some people who attribute the rampage of La Bête de Gévaudan to lycanthropy. La Bête de Gévaudan was a large wolf-like monster said to have slaughtered countless hundreds of people from 1764 until 1767 in the Gévaudan area of France. Now, whether these cryptids are true lycanthropes in the traditional mythological legendary sense or not, they're still a fascinating subject to look into because while it might be easy to write them off or ridicule them on the one hand, there are enough contemporary encounters to at least make you double check and look into it a bit more. It's an interesting subject, to say the least. I've really spent too much time living on Algonquin land to say this word, but for the sake of the video, the Wendigo is a vengeful, hungry, cannibalistic spirit of winter from the legends of Anishinaabe and Algonquin-speaking First Nations in the Great Lakes and Plains regions of North America. While most popular descriptions and depictions of the Wendigo feature it having a deer skull and antlers and a large animalistic body, the true form of this creature is much more akin to an emaciated and hungry corpse. It's very withered, it's very skeletal, its eyes are vacant and sunken in, it has long protruding fingernails, sometimes even the tips of the bones of the finger, that's where the claws really come from. The Wendigo itself is a spirit of the winter and of the cold. According to some legends, it can bring on blizzards and snowstorms just from its sheer presence. This is also a creature that people, ordinary people, have the potential to become. It is said that people who take part in cannibalism, whether out of desperation or out of selfishness or out of psychopathy, can become a Wendigo. And when you become one, you are a monster of unending and relentless hunger. You are never satiated. According to some legends, you even grow in proportion to the amount that you eat. This is one of those very misaligned and misinterpreted cryptids because there are several other similar entities to the Wendigo. For example, a lot of legends of skinwalkers get mixed in with the Wendigo stuff, but they're two very different entities. It's two different groups of people, two different groups of legends. There's a lot of different things at play here. And as I alluded to at the beginning here, you should not say the name because saying the name gives it power. And by gives it power, I mean it lets it know where you are. So if you are in the middle of the woods, in the middle of January, in the middle of Ontario, I would highly recommend not saying Wendigo. But if you live in the middle of suburbia like I do, I think you're generally safe. Still, I would take care to not whistle at night, not go out alone at night, not listen to the voices in the woods at night, and remember, if it sounds close, it's actually far away. And if it sounds far away, it's already too late to run. It was a late December night in 1735, and Mother Leeds was in labor with her 13th child. Already having 12 mouths to feed, she declared that she would much rather this child be born a devil. The child looked normal at first, but very quickly developed a long, forked tongue, horns on its head, large bat-like wings, and claws at the end of its fingers. The child slaughtered its family before escaping up the chimney and out into the pine barrens of New Jersey. And thus, the Jersey Devil was born. If that's not the coolest background to any NHL hockey team, then I don't know what is. This is just one of many stories revolving around the Jersey Devil, a popular cryptid in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, said to look like a bipedal horse or goat-like monster, basically just a stereotypical devil. While it was a very popular urban legend and seen frequently throughout the 1700s, sightings of the Jersey Devil in recent times have very much slowed down, and there isn't any photographic evidence of this creature either, with the exception of some suspicious-looking footprints on the roof of a building, but that's about it. Really, this is a surprisingly popular cryptid just because there isn't as much to go on, but I think just the veracity of its legendary status is what keeps it going in Jersey. It's just a fascinating monster. If you go to any small town in New Jersey, they probably have a museum or a gift shop dedicated to it. And if nothing else, that makes it really, really cool. You don't see many cryptids with that level of popularity anymore. Hey, look at this, everyone. It's another internet meme from 2007. Much like the Slender Man, the Rake was an internet urban legend first created on the Something Awful forum in 2006, inspired by a 4chan post attempting to create a new viral sensation or monster. The creature itself takes a lot of inspiration from sleep paralysis demons and the ideas of shadows looming at the end of your bed. Described as a very pale humanoid with large, glowing, or sometimes just black, cavernous eyes and these long claws on the end of its fingers, it's an entity that's either violent or surprisingly benevolent. There's no in between. It really depends on who's writing the story that you're reading because it only exists in stories. This is a made up creature. It just so happens that it has some of the most extensive and complex lore I've seen in an internet urban legend. However, much like the Slender Man, it has fallen into that realm of a lot of diehard fans believe it to be a legitimate creature based on trail cam photos like this one. And there are also a lot of people who take it way too seriously, but you have to remember that it's just an internet urban legend. It's a cool one. It's a fascinating monster with fascinating lore and backstory, but it's still just a fictional creature. Living thylacine refers to the idea that there is a remnant population of Thylacinus cynocephalus, otherwise known as the thylacine or the Tasmanian tiger. This large predatory marsupial once lived on the island of Australia as well as the islands of New Guinea and, of course, Tasmania. It was hunted to extinction in the wild by humans, believing that it would be a danger to our livestock, and the last captive individual, a male named Benjamin, passed away at the Hobart Zoo in 1936. And just as a little side note, because it irritates me, he didn't die of old age, he didn't die of starvation, he didn't die of a disease, he died freezing to death because the zookeepers forgot to put him inside. Can you believe that? Now, over the last couple of decades, ever since the 30s, there have been people saying on and on that they have spotted wild thylacines, that there is still a remnant population of them in the wild, and I hope this is true. I desperately want this to be like the one cryptid. If there's one that has to exist, I want it to be this one. Because just look at them. They're just, it's just an animal. It's just a beautiful animal, and I want them to still be around. Jackalopes and Wolpertingers are two incredibly similar cryptids, being the base of a rabbit with antlers. The jackalope is the more infamous of the two. It comes from old urban legends of the Wild West. It's just a jackrabbit with antlers or horns on its head that runs around in the scrubland, and most likely was spawned from sightings of rabbits suffering from the papillomavirus. The papillomavirus results in the rabbits growing these large horn-like warts from their head or their face, and so it would look like a rabbit with actual horns. Wolpertingers, on the other hand, come from Bavaria and Germany. They are also a horned rabbit, but these ones also come with wings and various magical powers. They are described as being a lot more fey-like, and supposedly they were a cure-all medicine in the medieval era, so very popular among shysters and snake oil salesmen. Overall, they're most likely both just hoaxes, but they're just such a fascinatingly classic style of urban legend. You can't help but love them. The Montauk Monster is probably the most well-known globster in all of cryptozoology. A globster, by the way, refers to any sort of body that washes up on shore in such a state of decay or desiccation that it's near impossible to determine the true origin of it. And such was almost the case with the Montauk Monster. Washing up on the northern shores of Long Island, New York in 2008, the Montauk Monster made quite a splash in the media as no one was quite sure what they were looking at. At first glance, it's a near imperceptible piece of mammalian body, you presume. There's clearly skin, but the head is decayed in such a way it looks like it has a beak. In addition to this, the flesh around the toes had decayed in such a fashion that they looked almost webbed, more like flippers than any sort of paws. Given that it washed up near the Plum Island Research Facility, a lot of people believed it to be the results of a genetic experiment gone awry, or perhaps gone successful. However, it was eventually determined, or at least explained away, as being a heavily decayed raccoon. When you take a look at the snout and muzzle area of the Montauk Monster, you can see a bunch of similarities to the teeth and dental structure of raccoon skulls, as well as what people believe to be the beak, would most likely just be the nasal cavity having decayed and cracked in such a way that it formed a single, almost bone-like shell. But, of course, a perfectly reasonable explanation like that does not stop the conspiracy theorists, and so there are a lot of people out there who believe the Montauk Monster is its own entity, a belief furthered when a second and then a third body washed up. However, these subsequent sightings ended up being hoaxes on their own, so the Montauk Monster was just a very, very waterlogged raccoon. Mokele Mbembe is the start of a very long and deep rabbit hole regarding the existence of extant prehistoric megafauna on the African continent. Most commonly sighted around the Congo River Basin, especially in the region of the Cameroon and the Central African jungle, Mokele Mbembe, a name which means the one whose body stops the flow of rivers, is often described as a large sauropod dinosaur. According to locals of the area, it is an incredibly territorial and violent animal. It spends most of its time either completely or partially submerged in the water, is occasionally described as carnivorous, and possesses a poisonous flesh who makes anyone that eats it incredibly sick. One thing I would like to point out about this cryptid and like a multitude of African cryptids, especially the ones which are extant prehistoric megafauna, is that there is no picture or video evidence of it. All we have is oral tradition, and while with a lot of cryptids that does make for a decent body to work off of, those other cryptids often have photographic or physical evidence to work with too. Mokele Mbembe has none of that. In fact, most of the time, the stories about this creature are applied to other known African megafauna. Things like elephants, rhinoceros, hippopotamus, sometimes even pangolin have been described as the true identity of Mokele Mbembe, which is a fascinating but also kind of disappointing idea in reality. Who doesn't want there to be a living sauropod dinosaur in the jungle? But as I'll get into further down this iceberg, there is a fascinating trend with post-colonial Africa having a whole bunch of extant prehistoric megafauna on the continent, and I really just want to dig into this because there is a lot to go over. On September the 12th, 1952, a UFO crashed in the woods outside of Flatwoods, West Virginia, leading to one of the most infamous extraterrestrial encounters in American history. A school teacher, an off-duty Air Force pilot, and several young school children responded to the crash site, believing it to be a downed fighter jet, only to come face to face with a 10-foot-tall extraterrestrial entity in a metallic suit with a spade-shaped head, 2 spindly arms, and 2 glowing red eyes. The Flatwoods Monster, as it has then been described, is one of the most infamous extraterrestrial encounters in North American history, and especially in the history of Appalachia. This is one of those encounters that I will, yes, have to do a deep dive in one of these days. I feel like I've been saying that this entire video, but with a topic like cryptozoology, there is a lot to get into and describe with these. There's a lot of deep dives left to be had. And some of the details of this encounter are as fascinating as they are confusing. For example, a lot of the witnesses of this initial encounter were then hospitalized for exposure to mustard gas, or at the very least, for symptoms and conditions similar to those who had been exposed to mustard gas. Everything about this encounter is confusing, it is bizarre, and I really want to discuss it further, but I also have to finish off this tier. Caught on the CCTV camera of one Vivian Gomez on June the 6th, 2019, Dobby the House Elf proves that subpar fantasy series are in fact infecting the real world. Yeah, this is the CCTV Dobby. It is one of the easiest things I will ever debunk. Let's break this down. So while this itself, if you watch the video, is not a puppet or a doll, it is very much a person. Like an actual real person, most likely Gomez's child. So the ears on the Dobby, for example, they're probably just a mask, or else they're the shirt pulled over their head so there's the sleeves flopping around. Speaking of flopping, they're wearing flip-flops. Last time I checked, Harry Potter freed Dobby with a sock, not a pair of chanclas. So whenever you want to see this video and act like there's weird elves in our neighborhood, well, yes, there are, but it's not this guy. Dobby is a free elf, and Dobby has better things to do than be in California. This is one of the most misattributed, misinterpreted, and misaligned cryptids I've ever heard of. The Skinwalker is infamous now on the internet, but in truth, it comes to us from Navajo, Naha, and Diné legends. A Skinwalker is the end result of somebody who has undergone a very dark, evil ritual. Essentially, you commit a deep evil, a black medicine, in order to become this shape-shifting monstrosity. This also makes it very easy to confuse with the Wendigo for people who either A, give it a passing glance, or B, refuse to do any deeper research. The Wendigo is a process that can be entirely accidental or done out of desperation. An act of cannibalism done to save your life, or else an act of greed so severe it transforms and blackens your soul. The transformation into a skinwalker is voluntary. You seek it out. You enact this bad medicine in order to become Ye Naldawoshi. With it, he goes on all forms. And I will never say that word again because much like the Wendigo, to say that word is to invoke their power and to draw them to you. It is spiritually dark and it is disrespectful, so I'm just not going to say either of those two words anymore. Skinwalker's still fair game though. And these are creatures that are pure evil, according to legends. They are not good. They do not represent anything good. And the internet just likes to interpret anything they see in the woods as being a skinwalker now. Anything they think looks or sounds weird is a skinwalker. Corpse-like gaunt entities more akin to ghouls are skinwalkers. Hell, this is why the idea of the flesh gate exists. Because if you never broke it down before, skinwalker, flesh gate. Put that together. This is a very complex, culturally rich, and spiritually dark thing to discuss. There's a lot of very serious mythology and belief and faith that goes into this sort of subject, and I will want to revisit it with the proper respect. But for now, stop calling everything skinwalkers. Not everything is a skinwalker. And with that, these first 2 tiers of the Cryptid Iceberg are done. I would just like to thank everybody for sticking through to the end of the video. Thank you for watching, hopefully for liking and commenting on it. It would mean the world if you did. I just really want to put my own 2 cents out there about a subject that I'm utterly fascinated by. You know, it's kind of funny. While I was still editing this video, I had already finished scripting and filming it, but while I was still editing it, Wendigoon went ahead and put out his own part 1 of a Cryptid Iceberg series, and my first thought was just, oh no, there goes my audience. They're just going to think I'm copying him. But luckily for me, he's doing a different iceberg than the one that I'm doing. It's a different list of subjects and a different list of details, so hopefully I still managed to find my audience. And like, no shade to the guy, but I was just really worried that I got beaten to the punch, you know, but I hope to bring something new to the table because this is a topic that's very near and dear to me. And I will be doing breakdowns of other cryptids in the future. I will be giving a lot of the entries on this iceberg their own special looks. Because, as I keep alluding to, a lot of them deserve it. There's a lot of fascinating stuff that goes into this hobby and this study, and there's a lot of just fascinating little details to look into. And I have right here my little journal. This has all of my notes in it. It's my script for the video. I have other iceberg ideas in here too. So I have a lot of information coming down the pipeline, a lot of ideas, a lot of future videos. So once more, thank you everybody for tuning in. I have a lot of fun stuff coming up in the future. If you want to catch me elsewhere, I am on TikTok and I do live stream TTRPGs. Yeah, fun fact, I don't just do cryptid stuff, I do other nerd stuff too. So if you want to watch me play an actual play series of Cyberpunk Red, a nice little mini series called Synthetic Dreams, go and watch Magi RPG on Twitch, subscribe to them on YouTube, all of our VODs go up there. Plenty of great shows, plenty of great players, plenty of great people. There's a lot to enjoy, just hours of content. And for the first time, and hopefully for many other times, I will be able to say it. Thank you all for watching.
What is this, a party?
Dad, talk some sense into your son. He wants to go on a picnic.
After what happened last time? You all remember that, right?
Please pass the egg salad.
Fraggle, Fraggle!
Ah! Somebody help me!
I say we let the boy go.